I have a Zoom meeting going on in the other room
Yeah,
with the law
He's not-
office.
he's not on yet. Anyway,
No.
all right.
I'm going to go back over there, and when I hear him, I will be listening, but I probably will not be talking.
Okay, I'll tell him that.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, you're
How
welcome.
old is there?
What do you? She just told me. But goodbye, Liz.
No, it was me.
What are you talking about? I don't know what he's talking about. Okay, go ahead, Liz. I'll wait for him. Hi, Estelle.
Hi. Hi, guys.
Morning, Rabbi.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Morning,
Good morning.
guys.
Good morning. So
Liz is on a Zoom meeting. She's listening, but she can't. All right, participate. Anyway, okay.
so on our Thursday class, we're on the same parsha as this parsha coming up, which is Korach. And I'm just saying out loud something that sort of came out of our Thursday class, but if I say it out loud enough times, maybe I'll remember it, which is that one second. Which is that it seems like at first glance that Korach's issue is with Aaron being made Kohen Gadol, which it very well might be that that's part of his problem. But what also seems from the context of all the study that we did about the Leviim was that there was another broader issue, which is that with the appointment of Aaron, it guts the role of the Leviim. That the assumption we would all make, by the way, it talked about the Leviim, is that the Leviim would be responsible for everything that happens in the Beis Hamikdash, and with the appointment of Aaron, their role is now extremely limited, extremely prescribed, because the Kohanim are going to end up, which is a subset of Leviim, but the Kohanim are going to end up doing all of the specific work connected to the Korbanos, and the Leviim are going to be relegated in the Midbar. The Leviim are going to be relegated to work under the guidance of the Kohanim to pack up the Mishkan and put it back together. But otherwise, they're going to be the symphony, the chorus, while Korbanos are brought, and they're going to be guards around it. And in the Beis Hamikdash, this is a relatively minor role. And Lois was pointing out that when Moshe says Rav lachem b'nei Levi at the beginning, that he's addressing this issue, which is that it's not simply that Aaron was given the position of Kohen Gadol, but that the Leviim themselves, their role has been dramatically limited by the fact that these Kohanim are now an institution, and that's something we see play out kind of later on. So that whole thing about the Leviim, it's like you have to do detective work in order to figure out what was the original role that the firstborn would have had if it hadn't been for the golden calf. And then the Leviim take over for the firstborn, and then the Kohanim somehow get inserted at some point. Did a Bechor ever bring a korban in the role of Bechor? There's an assumption, according to many, that the Tamid offering was brought even before the Mishkan. There may have been a Tamid that was the everyday offering that was brought. Did the Bechor bring that before the Leviim got switched? Did the Leviim at one point, were they involved in the Korbanos in a very active way before Aaron is appointed? How did that whole thing play out? Takes a lot of detective work to figure it out. But anyways, that I think has to be a subtext of this whole thing. Okay, now, what was I doing here? Mishnah Torah. It's funny, out of the blue, I got a email from Daron Kornbluth. He just wanted to touch base. And he was this person who had written that book about cremation. He was the book was used as part of a campaign to inform Jews of the problems with cremation and how it's so important that Jews are buried. We had just been doing that in the Rambam, just out of nowhere. I haven't been in communication with him for a couple of years. It just was funny. All right, so we talked about Eved Kanani the last time, a Gentile slave, and the positive commandment that once you own an Eved Kanani, you're supposed to own him in perpetuity. You're not supposed to free him. The Torah lists cases where the Eved Kanani is freed with a lost tooth or blinded eye. And then the Rambam says that these are just examples. It would apply to any limb that doesn't regenerate. So there are Torah exemptions that would free a Gentile slave. And then I mentioned that there are discussions in the Gemara which suggest that even there could be other reasons to free a slave, even something, it's possible, even if you had a community that only had 9 men, that freeing a slave so that the community could have a minyan might be enough of a reason to free a slave. When you free a Gentile, again, we do not have slavery anymore. We are not ever hoping to have slavery again, Gentile slavery. But they did have slavery. So in the discussion of those laws, so they had it. So we talk about the laws of it. But one of the things about a Gentile slave is that if they are freed into Judaism. They undergo some level of conversion, which is something that only exists with a Gentile slave. And that is, if it's a man, he is circumcised, and when he undergoes this conversion, he is now bound to all negative commandments. So he's not allowed to transgress. We haven't gotten to the list of negative commandments yet, but he's not allowed to transgress any of the negative commandments. And so he has a kind of interesting kind of quasi-Jewish status. He's not Jewish, but he has quasi-Jewish status. Because of that status, it's forbidden to sell a Gentile slave to an idolater, to a situation where he would be required to revert to idolatry, because he's not allowed to worship idols in his new state, in his state of quasi-Jewishness. And if for whatever reason he's freed, he's automatically Jewish. And so there were instances in the past where people were suggesting that this could be a way of solving a problem that, like a couple decades ago, was viewed as one of the looming disasters awaiting the Jewish population, which is you have a lot of people that consider themselves Jewish who are halachically not Jewish. So for instance, when the Reform movement decided that you could be Jewish based on patrilineal descent alone. So halachically, this person, let's say the person just has a Jewish father and they have a Gentile mother. So halachically, this person is not considered Jewish, but they self-identify as Jewish because that's the milieu that they grow up in. They think they are Jewish. And this creates a problem. Right now, we happen to know who these people are, but in a couple generations, we won't be able to distinguish between them and anybody else because it won't be remembered that that their mother wasn't Jewish. So this was considered a looming problem in the United States. In Israel, you had a kind of parallel problem when close to 1 million Russians or people from the former Soviet Union became citizens of Israel. And amongst those people were tens of thousands, maybe more than 100,000 people who were not Jewish, who came to Israel claiming to be Jewish. And so in Israel, you have this parallel problem with Jews from the former Soviet Union. So there was someone who I think his name was Jack Simcha Cohen, who wrote about this. I'm sure there were others who suggested this, that what's the problem? The problem is that these people want to be Jewish, but they don't want to live what we would consider a halachic lifestyle. If they would decide that they're open to living a halachic lifestyle, then you could have conversions of these people that wouldn't be cumbersome. They would let's say they were born of a Jewish father and a Jewish mother, and they thought that they were Jewish, for decades, and now they find out that they're technically not Jewish. So if this person would be willing to adopt a halachic lifestyle, then an Orthodox court would just formally convert them, and it wouldn't be a problem. The problem is that these people are not planning on living a halachic lifestyle, and they're not going to commit to living a halachic lifestyle. So they're not Jewish, and they're not going to be able to convert according to the halachic system. So what do you do with these people? So the proposed solution to this would be that you would make them Gentile slaves and then free them. Because when you free a Gentile slave, they automatically become Jewish, whether they're committed to living a halachic lifestyle or not. It does not require the acceptance of mitzvot as part of the process. So the proposal was just make all of them Gentile slaves and then free them. So there's one other situation where this was used in the time of the Mishnah as a solution to another problem, and that problem was mamzer. Let's say you have somebody who has the status of mamzer. Let's say this person found out, like in Chinatown, that they're the child of their mother and their grandfather. So they have a status of mamzer. A mamzer is a child born out of incest or adultery, not a child born out of wedlock. That is not a mamzer. A mamzer, the halachic status of mamzer is a child born from incest, halachic incest, or adultery. So let's say this person knows that they are a mamzer, but they are halachically observant and they want to live a full halachic lifestyle. The problem is that if they have children, let's say they're still of childbearing age and they want to have children, whatever children they have are also going to have the status of mamzer. The only way for their children not to have the status of mamzer is if let's say it was a man who was the mamzer, if his wife is not Jewish. If his wife is not Jewish, then the children are just not Jewish. And mamzer doesn't go through not Jewish. So if he married a woman who's not Jewish, and then they had children, those children would just be not Jewish. And then they would be converted. Again, this is a family that wants to live a halachic lifestyle. So the children will be converted, and when they're converted, they're Jews of full status as converts. They don't have the stigma of being a mamzer. The problem is you're not allowed to marry a Gentile. You're not allowed to. That is a prohibition. So you can't advise the person to marry a Gentile. So the solution is, what you do is you'd find a woman who'd be open to this, who is a Gentile woman, and you'd make her a slave. You'd give her the status of slave. Now she's a Gentile slave. The law is that, and then you'd make the Jewish husband a Hebrew slave or a Hebrew servant. The law is that the master of a Hebrew servant can have his Hebrew servant mate with a Gentile slave, and the children of that union belong to the Jewish slave owner. So in a time of slavery, this was an option, because you'd have her be a Gentile slave, you'd have him be a Jewish slave, and then they'd live as husband and wife, have children. When they're done having children, she would be freed, and her children would be freed, because obviously they're not in the slavery business. They're just trying to do this to resolve the problem. So they would all be freed. So she and her children would be automatically Jewish, and then he would be freed. And now they could live as a Jewish family, and the children wouldn't have the stigma of mamzer. So that would be another scenario where you'd make someone a Gentile slave for the purpose of fixing a halachic problem. So these are three scenarios where even in modern times, you might consider making a Gentile into a Gentile slave. So one of these, I think it was the mamzer case, was brought to the attention of Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik, and his line was, Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves, which was his shorthand for we can't do slavery even for this. You not only can we not have slaves anymore, but you can't even use slavery to fix these halachic problems. And it's always quoted. I don't know if it's something that everybody agreed with, but his position is always quoted on this. So it sounds to me like it's broadly accepted that even in a situation where you're just doing it as a kind of legal formality in order to resolve a large halachic problem, you can't go there. So when I say that we don't have slavery and we're not planning on going back to slavery, that's some of the basis for how I'm suggesting that, because he wouldn't even allow it for the fixing of what seems like a large halachic problem. Okay. So our next mitzvah is that he commanded us about the law of one who injures his fellow. So you have two people, let's say they get into a fight with each other, and one of them injures his friend in that fight. So, and that is his, Hashem's, may be exalted, saying, and when men quarrel, so they got into a fight, and now one of them is injured. So there's all sorts of laws that go into effect, all sorts of liability that the one who injured the other one now has. And they are called knas, or fines. And a verse already came that includes all of the laws of fines, and that is his may be exalted, saying, as he has done, so shall it be done to him. That which is taken away from him is in exchange for that which he hurts him, according to the measure of the hurt. So, as it appears in the tradition. So in the verses itself, it sounds like you do exactly to him what he did to the other guy. So if he broke the guy's arm, it sounds like you'd break his arm. Specifically, it says an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a burn for a burn. But it sounds like from that verse that what the Torah is asking is that you do exactly to the guy that which was done to him. But the Gemara is quick to point out that that is not how we understand that verse. What we understand the verse to mean is that which is taken away from him is in exchange for that which he hurt him, according to the measure of the hurt, as it appears in the tradition. So it's always money, is what it boils down to. It's always money. So he is going to have to compensate this person for what he lost. So, and then how you compensate him is worked out. There's a system for figuring out how you compensate him, but it is never the literal doing to the perpetrator what he had done to the other person, but it's always compensation. Even if it was only that he embarrassed him, behold, he is fined this measure of his money. So there's all sorts of categories. There's you have to pay for his medical expenses. You have to pay for the pain he suffered. You have to pay for if he lost work. You have to pay if he was embarrassed by what happened. And there's a fine or punitive damages that are assessed for each one of these. I have seen, I don't remember why, I think I was just watching the jury responses, their decision in an insurance case. Or I remember it was some case where a hospital was being sued, and they went through. So how much did you decide for real damages? And then they said the amount. How much did you decide for suffering? How much did you decide for punitive damages? In other words, they went through categories, and the jury had to assess an amount for each one of those categories. The Torah has, and then fleshed out in the Gemara, different categories that a person is potentially liable to pay for. But it's always payment. And you should know that all of these levels of fines that are laws between one person and another, and likewise, you should know that all of these fines that are laws between one person and another, and likewise, when an animal damages a person, or a person damages an animal, are indeed only judged and fined by a court of those who've been ordained in the land of Israel. This category of decision-making requires a certain level of smicha. In order to be able to assess fines, you have to have a certain level of smicha. You may not have to have that level of smicha for every judgment that a court makes. So if two people come before a court to decide a matter, one guy's just suing the other guy, and it's just always been about a financial issue. In that case, you you don't necessarily have to have this level of smicha. This level of smicha is a higher level of smicha. It seems to be the kind of smicha that would have been a continuous line of smicha from Moshe. So, and there are even higher levels of smicha, like to be able to decide on adding a leap year or things like that. So that might even require a higher level of smicha. But this, to be able to assess these kind of finds is a high level of smicha. That smicha was a direct line of ordination that went from Moshe Rabbeinu. Our tradition is that smicha was lost eventually, that somewhere in the towards at some point it may have gone as even a couple hundred years, because there still was a Sanhedrin, even a couple hundred years into the Common Era. But at some point, that smicha was lost. There is nobody today that has ordination that is part of that line of smicha. The Rambam does provide for a way to regenerate that level of smicha. And there was even a Sanhedrin that was formed in Israel like 10 or 20 years ago that used the Rambam's recipe for reviving that smicha. In the 1500s, there was a revival of smicha that smicha was given to Rabbi Yosef Karo, who is the author of the Shulchan Aruch. And then he gave smicha to, I think, 4 other people at the time. But there was such controversy about that smicha and whether it should have been done that it was stopped. They didn't continue that line of smicha, but there was a recent Sanhedrin that was set up in Israel. Adin Steinsaltz, I think, was the head of that Sanhedrin. He was given that smicha. He gave smicha to other people. I believe that the person who gave me smicha got that smicha, but he gave me smicha before he got that smicha, and he certainly did not give me that level of smicha. I got the lowest possible level of smicha imagined by the human race, and but he was the person who tested me. But his name is Rabbi Yoel Schwartz, and I know he was on that Sanhedrin, so I'm assuming that towards the end of his life he got that level of smicha as well. I don't. That Sanhedrin seems to have been a failed experiment, and so I don't know what's going on with their smicha. Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz passed away. I don't know what the story is with the members of what was that Sanhedrin, but I don't think there is a website. I think it's called sanhedrin.com or sanhedrin.org. That was their official website. And there may be more information over there. So anyways, but so when you see that somebody is called a rabbi nowadays, they do not, unless they were part of that group, they do not have the smicha we're talking about over here, which means that a Beit Din nowadays cannot assess so if somebody went to the CRC, if one guy had injured another person and they went before the CRC, even if both of them agreed to go to the CRC to adjudicate it, technically the CRC could, the Beit Din of the CRC would not be qualified to assess this kind of fines. That doesn't mean they couldn't find a workaround in order to resolve it. There are ways to find workarounds in a Beit Din kind of setting, a kind of outside the law kind of workarounds that they're also asked to do in order to preserve peace. So I'm sure that they could have workarounds, but this this level of smicha is not that kind of smicha that a place like the CRC would have, even though they adjudicate many other kinds of laws. Okay, and then that is that Hashem commanded us to administer the laws of the ox that causes damage, and that is his, maybe he's saying, and when an ox scores, and when an ox injures, and this law has already been explained in the first 6 chapters of Bava Kama. So this is when an animal that you own, in our case, most commonly, it would be a dog. If you owned a dog and that dog caused damage to another person's property or damage to another person, this law would go into effect. Now, if there's some elements of this law that also fit into the previous one, as the Rambam pointed out. If it actually injures the person, another person, then it might end up in those kanas laws that we talked about before, the fines category. If it's just damages, then it would not. Then it would just be straight damages. So let's say your dog ate somebody else's homework. So then, that would be more of a straight damages case and assessed according to the damages. This continues a discussion that just in the past couple of years has been a matter of interest to me, and that is the relationship between people and objects. That there's an assumption in the Torah that people own things, and the assumption that you own something comes together with a kind of protected relationship. Is that relationship is considered legally protected. So we take it for granted that you can't take something that belongs to somebody else without their permission, but that makes the assumption that there's some kind of bond, unique bond between people and objects. And animals would fall under this category as well. So, if you took something that belonged to somebody else or damaged something that belonged to somebody else, that's a kind of protected relationship, and there's all sorts of consequences between that. The notion that we have this kind of relationship with objects is really a profound one. It has tremendous consequences, and I find it fascinating, something to explore. Also, the notion that we can own land. We take it for granted that people own land, but there are cultures that find that sort of surprising, that people think you can own land. That's how apparently Native Americans felt, or at least some Native Americans felt, that the land could not be owned. They were surprised by the notion that Europeans thought that you can actually own land. But we take it for granted. The Torah takes it for granted. There is this moment where Chava, when she gives birth to Cain, she names him a name that is related to acquiring, that she acquired, this child with God. So there is a lot of discussion over there. What happened there? What was going on there? And how significant is that moment? And I think this issue of acquiring land or acquiring things is somehow related to that moment. But anyways, it is a subject that deserves meditation. I am grateful for getting this opportunity to learn with you guys. We are going to learn together tomorrow as well, Be'ezrat Hashem. On Wednesday, we are not. My wife is having knee replacement surgery on Wednesday.
Oh my
So
goodness.
we are not meeting.
I need to follow up on that.
Right. But I'm assuming that we're not going to meet on Thursday as well, which means I'm assuming our Thursday class is not going to happen.
Well,
If
that's up
that-
to you.
you know, yeah.
Will
Okay.
Sippy be in the hospital overnight?
That is the plan. She's going to be at Skokie, and the plan is that she'll be in overnight.
Okay,
Okay. All right. So, but tomorrow we're meeting.
got it, I think.
All right. Be well, guys.
Just one quick question,
Yeah.
if you have a base then that's considering a capital case, would
Yeah.
all of the justices have to have that high level of smicha?
Yes. Yeah.
So they would all have to have it, because otherwise you wouldn't have a sufficient number.
I think in order to be on on any of those courts, yes.
Okay.
The thing is, with lashes, not sure about biblical lashes. I know they continue to do rabbinic lashes, even with courts that didn't have that smicha, but I don't know about biblical lashes, because they're usually put together, the biblical lashes and the
Rabbinic.
and biblical lashes and corporal and the capital punishment. They're often put together, but I don't know why. But I don't know. I'm not sure about lashes, but yes, but in order to do capital punishment, they all have to have that that smicha. And the Sanhedrin has not, even though they had a Sanhedrin until the 400s of the Common Era, the Sanhedrin already at the time of Herod, which is before the Common Era, ceased to be involved in capital punishment cases. So, but I'm assuming when the Sanhedrin is renewed in its full vigor, that would be available to the Sanhedrin, and it would not just the Sanhedrin. You could have a court of 23, but they would all, anyways, just have a Sanhedrin. It has to somehow be renewed to have that level of smicha. Okie dokie. All right.
Thank you so much.
Okay. You all. Bye bye.
Tomorrow.
Yes, tomorrow.